Welcome back again to Irinka's Kitchen. What I'd like to do is share a recipe with you that my grandmother and mother made, and it's called layered potatoes, Rakott Krumpli. Krumpli means potatoes in Hungarian. So what I've done is, to begin with, I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and I've cooked some potatoes. I've cooked about 8 medium red table pepper potatoes. And what I did was I've also cooked some eggs up, some hard-boiled eggs, and I've cooked about 8 medium whole eggs. And then what I've done is I've sliced up all of these ingredients. So I've sliced up in wedges some potatoes, and I've also have a half a kilogram of sausage. I've used some garlic sausage. But the traditional Hungarian recipe would be to use smoked sausage. But I've used the Ukrainian garlic sausage. So I've sliced them up into medium-sized wedges, and then I've cooked up some eggs, about 8 medium eggs, and I've sliced them up into wedges. So what I'm going to begin to do now is I'm going to start my first layer. And before I do that, what I did was I put small pats of margarine across the bottom of my casserole dish, so that your recipe doesn't burn on the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cover the bottom of my casserole dish, and I kind of put 3 to 4 in a row, depending on the width of your casserole dish. And this is great because for presentation, you could actually take this dish and you could actually put it onto your table, and it could be served from this dish, the casserole dish that I've got. And it's a rectangular shaped one, but you can use a round one also. It doesn't have to be this shape, whatever you have at home. So I'm just going to line the bottom of my casserole dish with the potatoes. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle half of my my salt and pepper. So what I've done is I've divided it. In my recipe it says 4 teaspoons of pepper. What I've got in this particular bowl is 2 teaspoons of pepper. So I'm going to sprinkle it on the top of the potatoes. So the main thing is that you're sprinkling it right directly onto the potatoes. So there's going to be a total of 3 layers. 2 layers of meat and eggs, and just 1 layer on the top, and then of course the sour cream will go right at the top of the recipe. Now I have a picture of what this particular recipe looks like on my website. I have a typed up version of it, and there's pictures of what the before and after look like. So this is very a meal in one. You don't really need to serve any other, not even salad to it. So this is kind of like a meal in one. Now I'm taking my sea salt and I'm sprinkling that on the top of my potatoes, and that's half of the ingredients that I had called for in my recipe. So it's 1 teaspoon of salt. So I kind of sprinkle it evenly so you don't get a big dollop of salt in one area of your potatoes. Then what I do is I take my eggs and I fill up sort of like the spaces between the potatoes that I've left, and I've just kind of put them there. It's mainly for presentation, so that when someone is serving, you're serving this to someone, that they get some eggs on their plate. So I kind of make sure that it's equally distributed on the first and second layer. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to take some sausages, and I'm going to do the same thing. And I've actually used quite a bit of sausages. These are actually quite small pieces. So just in between, on top of the potatoes and the eggs. And then I kind of divide this up into half, so we've got equal amounts of meat on both the layers. So I'm just going to fill this up as much as possible, probably add some more eggs here. So this was quite a common recipe for my mom, like she would make this at least once a month for the family. And sometimes for her guests, she would invite over guests. And you can double this or triple this recipe if you're expecting a lot of company. And my grandmother would do it with just eggs. Sometimes just eggs and potatoes and sour cream. So it can be done without eggs, without meat. And whatever is available. The traditional recipe is smoked sausage, like a smoked Hungarian sausage. But if you're not able to get Hungarian sausage, then you can use whatever. I'm using a sort of a lean Ukrainian garlic sausage today. Then what I do is I put another layer of potatoes on top of the meat and the eggs, so it's kind of like in a layer. And I've used medium potatoes. I have 2 tips on my website, and that is that try not to cook the overcook them, because they will actually bake in the oven. So if they're a little bit half cooked when you're putting the layers on, don't worry about that, because then they'll continue to bake in the oven. So I'm just going to cover this as much as possible. And then I've got another plate cut up there of potatoes. So I'm just going to bring this over here, and I'm just going to fill in, cover up most of this, the eggs and that on top. Just cover it up as much as possible, randomly, and fill in the spaces. And then I'm going to leave enough for the top layer to cover the top layer. So you kind of have to kind of estimate and sort of decide how many you need, how you can cover this up. And some of them are broken pieces. Don't worry if you're cutting up your potatoes and some of the pieces ended up broken. They work well for small areas to cover. They're not going to come out evenly as perfect wedges, so not to worry about that. So I've pretty well got all of this covered with the potatoes. Then my next step is to use, again, some salt and pepper. So you're always adding the salt and pepper to the potatoes. So I've got the other 2 teaspoons of pepper. I have 4 teaspoons of pepper, but I've kind of equally divided it up so that I have even amount of salt and pepper throughout the recipe. You want that even taste. So I just sprinkle that around, and then evenly. And then I've got some more salt, sea salt, so that's the other teaspoon of salt. So I just evenly distribute that on there. You can cut back on your sodium if you're on a sodium diet, sodium-free diet. So you can use your favorite herbal spices if you want. If you have herbs, you can use that also. I'm just going to evenly distribute this onto my recipe. Okay, so got a little bit more pepper left over. I'll make sure that it's put on there. This is, like I say, it's a meal in one. It's very filling. And this would serve about 4 to 6 guests, this particular recipe. But if you wanted to double it, that's great too. So then again, I start with eggs. And I keep doing Just use up all the remaining eggs that I have for that next layer, and I evenly distribute it on there. So this is actually done with smoked sausages. So just continue to fill in the spaces again. And I've used medium eggs for this particular recipe. Whatever remaining, sometimes the eggs break apart, I just kind of sprinkle that on the top of the eggs. And then I take my sausages, and then I again put another layer of and fill in the spaces with meat and sausages evenly. And this is about 500 grams of sausage. And it looks a lot because the sausages were kind of thin, so that's why I'm getting a lot more pieces. And if you get a thicker sausage, you're going to get less. But I'm going to spread that all around the sides and fill in those spaces where there isn't anything. And I continue to do that. And you might find that you have too much. Then you can just kind of save this for a sandwich or whatever. Any leftover meat, because I'm not going to use all of it. This recipe shouldn't be frozen because it has a sour cream and eggs in it. I wouldn't advise you to freeze it. So it can be kept for probably 2 days. You'd probably want to eat it the second day as soon as possible. You can make half of the amount that I have here. You can make a smaller recipe if you want. You don't need to make as much. But it's great even the second day. Just put it into the fridge, and it's a fantastic dish, and it's very filling. So I'm just going to make sure to cover most of this with potatoes. And then I'm going to take some not cottage cheese, sour cream. But I've got some margarine, so I'm going to put some margarine on there on the top of the potatoes. Dollops of little pats of margarine there on the top before I put the sour cream on there. And the reason for that is that it makes the potatoes moist, because they kind of, once you cut them up, they kind of dry out a bit. So you want to give it a little bit more moisture. So I'm just putting pats of margarine on there, and I've got about 6 tablespoons. You could probably use less than that. Use as much as you feel you want to put on the recipe. Just put small amounts across the top of that, evenly on the top, and then make sure it covers the whole area. And then what I do now is I cover this whole area with I'm using a low-fat sour cream. I'm just going to spread this on the top, and I'm going to use the whole thing. And this is about 500 milliliters of sour cream. And I just evenly spread it on the top. And I use just a large spoon to do that. Make sure that it's evenly distributed. And I cover, and what happens is that the sour cream kind of runs between the meats and the layers, so it gives it that sort of a sour taste to it. Sort of a sour taste to it, and that's what's really interesting about this recipe. And then you can, of course, taste the garlic sausage and the eggs. So the combinations are great. The ingredients really make this a tasty, very tasty recipe. Then, of course, your pepper. So I use quite a bit of black ground pepper in my recipe. So I'm just going to spread this. Use the whole container here of low-fat sour cream. It's just like icing on a cake. You know, you want to try to evenly distribute it. This takes a little bit more time to do because you want it to be evenly, you want the sour cream to be evenly going through the layers. And some people put sour cream in between the layers, but then it becomes a bit too soggy. You don't want the recipe to be too soggy. So it's great with smoked sausage too. If you can get a hold of, it doesn't have to be Hungarian sausage, but if you can get a hold of at the farmer's market, usually at farmer's market or a deli, a nearby deli that you have, that you go to, sometimes they will make Hungarian sausages. So what I would do when this is done is I would put it into a 350 degree oven for about 30 minutes, and then I would lower the temperature to 325 degrees Fahrenheit for another additional 15 minutes. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to put it in the oven, and I'll be back to show you what this great recipe looks like. Welcome back again to Irinka's Kitchen. I have in the oven a recipe called layered potatoes, Rakott Krumpli, and it's been in the oven for about approximately 45 minutes. I've started the temperature off at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and then I've lowered the temperature for another 15 minutes to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. So I've just taken it out of the oven, and I'd like to show you what this great recipe looks like. Now it's smelling just great, like it's just come out of the oven, and this is a meal in one. So you could serve this just on its own, and this recipe would probably serve about 4 to 6 guests. So if you wanted to double the recipe, you would just double everything that you see the ingredients on my recipe to serve more people. So this is a very popular recipe that my mother and grandmother served at least once a month. And my grandmother would serve it without meat also. It can be served without meat, but the traditional way to serve it is with smoked Hungarian sausage, and you could probably get that at your nearest farmer's market. So I hope that you will enjoy serving this to your friends and family. Until next time, if you have any questions, you can contact me at irene@irinkaskitchen.com or irinkaskitchen.com. Bon appetit, jó étvágyat!